Hello and welcome back to another wonderful episode at MSA. We are so glad you made it back and so glad to see you. Seems today we're going to talk about something that it's kind of got me heated. I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm not going to even lie about it. Actually, it's got me really heated. It seems that Maine, the Secretary of State of Maine, decided to remove Donald Trump from their primary ballot. Now, we're going to get into a little bit of depth on this one. So, before we get started, you already know what's coming. Like, share, and subscribe. We need you to do that for us, and we'd really appreciate it. See that little button? It's right there. It says like, share, or if you're watching the TV, it's right there. Yep, that one. Click that one. And share. You got to share. We need this kind of stuff, especially this kind of stuff, to go out. And you're going to hear a big reason why coming up in just a minute. Now, we're going to roll a clip, and we want you to hear from CNN what they had to say about this. It's just couple minutes long. We wanted you to participate in their wonderful newscasting, and then we're going to come back and definitely talk about this one. Okay? All right, we'll see you in just a second.
We have breaking news this hour as Maine's top election official has now disqualified Donald Trump from the ballot in that state, an effort that was underway. CNN's Caitlin Polantz has just read this filing and is following this. Caitlin, what is the Secretary of State saying in this decision here?
Caitlin, the Secretary of State of Maine is saying that Donald Trump is not qualified to be on the ballot in the primary in the state of Maine after reviewing petitions from different people who came to her and wanted to remove Trump from the ballot. I'm still looking through it, but one of the findings here from the Secretary of State is that Trump must meet certain qualifications to be able to be on the ballot, and is finding that he is not meeting those qualifications and thus cannot be on the ballot. Now, this is a big decision from the Secretary of State of Maine. Make no mistake about that. It is in line with what Colorado appears to have done here as well, with the Colorado Supreme Court looking at Donald Trump being on the primary ballot there and saying he couldn't be. But the thing about Maine is that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to appeal this. So the Secretary of State is the person here making that decision instead of the court system. But what happens next is that Trump and others all have the opportunity to go to Maine's court system to appeal this. And all of that can play out in a very short amount of time. We could have some sort of resolution in the courts, depending on how fast the courts move and how fast everyone goes to the court. It could be a decision where we're hearing the Maine's court system also coming in and interpreting the state law within a month or so, basically by the end of January.
And so, Caitlin Polantz, just because this is breaking news, we truly have just gotten this in. I just want to be clear. The Secretary of State here is pausing her decision pending potential action from the Supreme Court?
I have not gotten to that point in reading this conclusion yet. I would have to look at that a little bit more closely. Things get very complicated when it comes to pausing rulings. But one of the things with this that we should be very clear about here is that the courts are almost certainly going to be weighing in, both state courts in Maine, because there's all kinds of things in the law for Maine to allow Trump or others to appeal this decision from the Secretary of State. That state court can look at it. And of course, Caitlin, the Supreme Court of the United States is already looking at that petition from Colorado's Republican Party saying, please weigh in, because every state has a different process and is making different decisions about Donald Trump being on primary ballots in 2024.
Okay, you got to see the clip. Now, you see the lady is discussing this Secretary of State taking Trump off the primary ballot. Now, I love the validity of why the Secretary of State did, because I was waiting for give me this big, juicy reason as to why. And basically, there was a bunch of petitions that were handed to her, and she decided that it would be best to take Trump off the primary ballot. Now, this is kind of a blue state trend that's going on here. You know, and they wanted to say that Minnesota was getting involved, and Michigan was getting involved, and unfortunately, those states are not getting involved. They've decided that they will leave Donald Trump on the ballot, and they're not going to participate in this witchery. The reason I'm very upset about this, let's take a couple words that they used. First off, they were saying that his qualifications. Are you kidding? He's a previous American president. He rocked the snot out of this country. He put America back in the game. Okay? And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, take a look around at what we're dealing with. Okay? We have other countries' leaders laughing at us because our leader doesn't stand up to them at all. They can walk all over them. Look at how we ended up giving back one of the biggest hackers known to mankind. We gave him back to Russia. We don't give in to terrorists. We don't give in to terrorism. We don't give in to threats. But so far to date, Biden's done that on numerous occasions. We're looking at, so you hear this thing about his qualifications, okay? That's what took him off the ballot. That makes absolutely no sense. We already made that point. We'll go on to the next one. The fact that she's going to hold back to see what the Supreme Court has to say. Now, let's take a look at what all this means really quick, because we're going to talk about it from my point of view, being the fact that everybody's talking about Trump's insurrection, January 6th and all that. Now, if you watch some of that January 6th committee and you see Chuck Schumer get up and he starts talking about what Tucker Carlson covered when he got to see some of the tapes that the previous Speaker of the House let him view on the January 6th insurrection, the big incident that happened and all that. And what Schumer made it out to sound like it was the most devastating thing that had ever happened. And maybe he never saw any of the footage of what happened to America after George Floyd, because that wasn't a dance in the flowers in a field. Okay, billions of dollars of damage, billions upon billions of dollars of damage to businesses, rioting and looting and people getting hurt and the whole 9 yards. Okay, we're still unpacking this whole thing on this January 6th thing, but we've got to really pay one big part of the attention here is the fact that Trump's not up on any insurrection charges. Matter of fact, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to read real quick exactly what Jack Smith charged Donald Trump with. Trump was conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. That's what his charges are. You don't hear insurrection anywhere in there, but yet this seems to be the narrative. And I really want to make a big valid point about this. When you watch this mainstream media, they start going off on their own narratives based on what these blue states are also talking about, what they want to do. And pretty soon, it sounds like that's what's happening because that's all you hear over and over and over again. But let me remind you, Trump is not up on insurrection charges. Now, they want to say that he violated the 14th Amendment and that Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, it basically takes him out. Okay, he can't be a part of it because of that. But again, you have to be convicted of that. Okay, because if that was the case, let's just put it into context. When they tried to impeach Donald Trump, that would mean while he was going through the impeachment process, they would just remove him from presidency. Okay, it's the same thing as what we're talking about right now. Taking him off the ballot while he's having to go through all these allegations that are not being proven against him. Okay, you see my point? Again, doesn't make sense. Now, here's the one valid point that nobody talks about when they talk about this 14th Amendment and the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Very important one. But what they don't talk about is the Section 5. And I'm going to, again, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to read one more thing real quick so you understand what Section 5 says. I'm going to read it in pretty simple terms here. You ready? Without question, Section 5 of the 14th Amendment changed the structure of our federal system. By its terms, this provision plainly vests Congress with the authority necessary to prevent state governments from invading the fundamental rights of the American populace. What is those fundamental rights? The right to vote. That's big time in there, the right to vote. And when you look at our right to vote and you look at what's going on, And then they turn around and say that he doesn't have qualifications, meaning Trump, and that these petitions didn't want him in there. That means we're looking at people's opinion as to why they don't want him in there. But yet you look at his polls across America, and he's off the charts. We haven't seen anything like this. His polls are insane. He's doing awesome. Not only that, but they did a recent poll where there's over 35,000 people that have now changed their minds from Democrat to Republican just for this election. That was another recent poll that's really not getting covered out there that much. I'm almost positive about that. Now, going back into this, what's got me so heated about it and upset, well, maybe we should wait a second on that. You know what we should do? We should roll the second clip, because the second clip is going to basically come on in with a little bit of what's going on with the Jack Smith, the Donald Trump, and the whole 9 yards. And then at the end of that, then let's get back into this commentary a little bit and wrap this thing up. Because I don't want to get up on a soapbox, but like I said, I'm actually pretty heated over this because it's really getting to me how it's going against the American way. And I mean that. It wouldn't matter if it was Donald Trump or if it was, Barack Obama. It's a witch hunt. So anyway, let's roll this second clip and we'll go ahead and get right back into it in just a second, all right? Look forward to seeing you in just a minute. Hang in there.
Meanwhile, Special Counsel Jack Smith responded to former President Donald Trump's request to postpone the Supreme Court's examination of his claim to criminal immunity in a forceful filing. Last week, the Supreme Court accepted Special Counsel Jack Smith's plea to address the matter of presidential immunity following Judge Tanya Chutkan's dismissal of 2 motions from Trump's legal team based on First Amendment and presidential immunity arguments. In reaction, Trump and his legal team submitted a request asking the court to await a ruling from the lower appeals court on the matter. And on Thursday, Smith filed a vigorous reply opposing Trump's motion and delivering a sharp rebuke, writing, "The charges here are of the utmost gravity. This case involves, for the first time in our nation's history, criminal charges against a former president based on his actions while in office. The nation has a compelling interest in a decision on the respondent's claim of immunity from these charges, and if they are to be tried, a resolution by conviction or acquittal without undue delay."
On top of all of this, Colorado's Supreme Court decision to keep Trump off of the ballot in that state is fueling the fire for blue states seeking to do the same. Democrats in Michigan, Maine, and California are already pulling the levers to see if they can follow suit. So yeah, go ahead, Robin.
I was just going to add, if all of that wasn't enough, Ed Meese, the former Attorney General under Reagan, I believe, submitted a friend of the court brief that I found very interesting that argues that Jack Smith lacks standing to bring this legal action against Donald Trump because Merrick Garland's appointment of him was not based on any statutory authority granted to the office of the Attorney General. Again, that's just one argument to throw into the mix, but I saw a lot of people in conservative legal circles circulating that information on social media, the argument that this is all illegitimate for that reason. So there's that.
All right, we're back. Now, you got to see the second clip. Like I said before we went into that, some things that really burned me up. So let's talk about that clip for a second. You got Jack Smith up there, and you see in his words how this is the gravity of this situation, blah, 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 blah. Never been before, trying on a president. Okay, great, Jack. But he's trying to push this thing forward. Everybody thinks, yeah, it's the election, the whole 9 yards. There's a little bit more to it than just the election, okay? Let's just back up for a second and understand why I'm heated over this. Now, we have this whole issue where let's just remove the candidate so you don't have the right to vote, especially the leading candidate. Let's just take them out because that makes sense, right? And what's our name? Right. Okay. Now, when you kind of back up the horse for a second here and you look at the situation, you have Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland, whether you know this or not, was nominated to be a Supreme Court justice on the federal level. Now, when he was nominated, the person that had passed away, I believe it was Scalia, when they passed away, it was during an election year. So they didn't want to fill that slot yet, okay? So Merrick Garland was nominated, and then on January 3rd of 2017, his nomination expired. 293 days later, it expired. Now, Donald Trump took office on January 20th of 2017. Now, when you look at all of this, and you say, okay, big deal. Well, Merrick Garland really wanted that spot. So then let's go forward. The next person to be nominated was Gorsuch, I believe his name is. He was appointed in as a Supreme Court justice. And then later, Kavanaugh gets put in as a Supreme Court justice. Now, when you look at these two individuals, you'll also see when Chuck Schumer's out there saying, well, you better watch yourself, Gorsuch, you better watch yourself, Kavanaugh, because you better pay attention, we're coming after you, and blah, blah. And what does that got to do with? A lot of the Supreme Court decisions, like, does President Trump have immunity or not? Okay, now, tying all this back in together, Jack Smith wanting to push this stuff along as fast as possible. Why would he want to do that? You say, well, it's because of the election. He wants to get Donald Trump tied up so when Trump's got to go out there and do what he's got to do, he'll be all tied up in court. That's one good theory, and that's what everybody seems to be painting the picture on. But let's back it up for a minute. We have a gentleman in there by the name of Edward Meese that you heard in the clip. He sent out a document stating that he didn't feel that Jack Smith had good standing on being able to prosecute Donald Trump, and that Merrick Garland didn't have the statute of authority in order to follow through with all of this. Now, what does that mean? Well, having good standing means that Jack Smith filed all the necessary paperwork that he needed to file and have everything line up and make sure that he had a good, solid case. What's the second part of that? Well, the statute of authority means that Merrick Garland didn't get the approval that everything lines up, and that as they go forward after Donald Trump, that the government has no liability in this. See? Now it starts to make a little bit of a difference. Now, again, earlier I read something to you, and normally I don't ever do that. But in this case, I'm going to read one more thing to you, and we're going to wrap all this up. And this is why this really burns me. Because, you see, it's about Jack Smith. Jack Smith worked in the Obama administration. From 2010 to 2015, he was working, I can't remember exactly what his title was, but he basically was on part of the team that right as Donald Trump got elected in 2016, that's when the witch hunt started, okay? Now, when you look at why, let's look at Merrick Garland's choice of people. You got David Weiss going after Hunter Biden for 5+ years. The Oversight Committee has been turning up all kinds of wonderful things, and David Weiss could have had Hunter Biden years ago, and he's just let it kind of slide on through. Almost like Jack Smith going after Donald Trump for all these documents that they found at the Mar-a-Lago. No attorney general in history has ever gone after any president for having classified documents, okay? Now, Jack Smith, I'm going to read something to you real quick, and then you'll understand why I'm a little upset about him, okay? So, let's just read from the top. Among his more notable corruption cases, Smith prosecuted the former governor of Virginia, Robert McDonald, a Republican. Although Smith scored a conviction against McDonald, the case was later overturned by the Supreme Court in a unanimous 8-0 decision. See, that's where that vacancy was. The court observed that there is no doubt that there's a case is distasteful. It may be worse than that. But our concern is not with the tawdry tales of Ferraris and Rolexes and ball gowns. It is instead with the broader legal implications of the government's boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statute. The High Court also rebuked Smith and warned that the uncontrolled power of the criminal prosecutors is a threat to our separation of powers. Smith prosecuted and convicted former Democrat vice presidential nominee John Edwards. By not losing on any of the 6 felony counts of which he was being tried, John Edwards won the biggest victory of his political and legal life. A mistrial on 5 counts and acquitted on 1 resulted in a clear, if not complete, legal vindication and likely fatal setback for federal prosecutors seeking to convict the former U.S. Senator and 2004 Democratic vice presidential nominee for allegedly violating the Federal Election Campaign Act. Smith prosecuted Democrat Bob Menendez on public corruption, which we got to see a little bit of that, and there seemed like some pretty hardcore, stiff evidence against Menendez, but that ended in a mistrial because Jack Smith didn't handle it properly. Is this starting to see a trend here? A little bit of a trend? You wonder why this gentleman came forward and said that he didn't think Smith had the standing on this? Now, there's one other little thing that says in here. It says Smith is the subject of House investigations from overzealous investigations and prosecutions. And currently, Jim Jordan's got him on his radar because there's just too many things that don't add up with this guy. Now, getting back to this whole thing, we've got Jack Smith doing this and the insurrection, that, and all of this stuff. And what does it all come down to at the end? What's all the boiling water at the end of the day? They're trying to take away our right to vote for the person that we feel would be the best person to take over our country and help us get everything back in line. That's the bottom line. You know, again, like I said earlier, it wouldn't matter if it was Donald Trump or Barack Obama. When you have a witch hunt like this going against people, it's time for some of us to stand up in the ways that we should be standing up. And violence is never the answer because violence just comes out to be ridiculous and it's hurtful to everyone else but the people that you need to take action against. Okay? So anybody that ever does that, it's just ridiculous. But what we do need to do, okay, if they're doing petitions, we should do petitions. If they're doing writing, you know, your congressmen, your senators, write everybody, you know, send your voice out there. Go to places where they're having not protests, but, you know, where they're getting together as a community and talk with one another and see where everybody's head's at. So, because look at it this way. While we were in the middle of watching that clip, California, their Secretary of State announced that they're not going to take Donald Trump off the ballot, even though they were getting high pressured from their lieutenant governor. Now, why would you get high pressured from your lieutenant governor? The Secretary of State's the one that decides that. And they obviously did, and they're going to keep Trump on the ballot. So if you look at Maine, Colorado, what are they doing? What are they doing? They're trying to take your voice away. Okay? When you look at Michigan, Minnesota, California, what are they doing? They're letting your voice be heard. Even though they're blue states, we all get it, at least they're making the right decisions. But do me a favor. Put some comments in there. What do you think about all of this? It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And don't get twisted up in all this rhetoric that you're hearing out there. You know, it doesn't take but 10 minutes to fact check some of this stuff. Because believe me, I fact check whatever you're hearing. I don't just come off with something that sounds outlandish. But again, comment. We need to hear some of your comments. Now, do us a favor. Like, share, and subscribe. Sorry I got up on the soapbox, but this is a big one. This is a big deal. Okay? And normally I wouldn't run a segment this long, but this has got to stop. It's just got to stop. So, like, share, and subscribe. You know, tell a friend. Tell all your friends. Tell your people you don't even know your friends. Make a friend by showing them this video. Okay? All right. Well, look, day, night, whatever time it is, wherever you're at. I hope everything's going great for you. And just remember, we absolutely love you. Look forward to seeing you again. And have a great, whatever it is out there you're having. All right? Take care. See you later.